Welcome back. If you've been here for the last 3 weeks, your body has been doing something. It's been learning to notice, not fix, not analyze, just notice. Week 1, we talked about surveillance fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from being watched instead of met. Week 2, we sat with installed guilt, the weight your body carries for emotional climates it did not create. Week 3, we looked at freeze, the way your nervous system shuts down your real responses and replaces it with something polite, something managed, something safe. Today, we're going to talk about what happens next. Because something does happen next, and it usually happens after you walk away. You leave the conversation, you get in your car, you close the door to your room, and something starts. Your mind begins to scramble. That's what we're sitting with today. Confusion after conversation. And I want to show you why it's not what you think it is. What this looks like. Let me describe it, and you tell me if your body recognizes it. You just had a conversation. Maybe it was with a parent, a partner, a sibling, a boss, someone at church. On the surface, nothing terrible happened. Nobody yelled. Nobody slammed a door. If someone asked you what went wrong, you wouldn't be able to point to a single thing. But you feel wrong. Your mind starts replaying the conversation, not once, over and over. You're scanning it. You're trying to find the moment where it shifted. You're analyzing their tone, their word choice, the look on their face. You're trying to figure out what just happened. And the harder you try to pin it down, the less clear it gets. You start second-guessing yourself. Did I misread that? Was I being too sensitive? Maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm making something out of nothing. And then, this is the part that gets people. You start to feel like reality shifted. Like what you perceived in the conversation doesn't match what apparently happened. Like the ground moved under your feet and nobody else noticed. That is not anxiety. That is not overthinking. That is relational destabilization. Where this lives in the body, confusion after conversations doesn't just live in your mind. It lives in your body, and it has a very specific signature. The head gets foggy, not tired, foggy, like trying to think through gauze. Your thoughts don't track in a straight line, they circle. The chest tightens. There's a weight there that hasn't been there before the conversation. You might not call it anxiety. It feels more like pressure, like something is sitting on you. The stomach drops or clenches, not nausea, more like the feeling of having done something wrong, which connects directly back to week 2. The installed guilt wakes up and says, "This must be your fault." Your hands might feel restless. You might reach for your phone to scroll, or clean something, or start a task you don't need to do. Your body is trying to discharge something it can't name. And underneath all of it is a particular kind of exhaustion. Not the kind you get from working hard, the kind you get from trying to hold two realities at once. What you experienced and what the other person apparently experienced, when those two realities don't match. The body carries the confusion the mind can't resolve, and it will keep carrying it until you understand where it came from. The replay loop. I want to talk about the replay because this is the thing that survivors of covert relational harm describe more than almost anything else, and it's almost always misunderstood. You leave the conversation and your mind starts looping, playing it back, editing it, rewriting your lines, trying different responses, arguing with the person in your head, composing what you should have said, should have noticed, should have caught. And people around you might say, stop overthinking it. Let it go. You're making yourself anxious. But here's what's actually happening. Your brain is not overthinking. Your brain is trying to solve a problem that was designed not to be solvable. In a conversation where someone subtly shifts the meaning of what was said, where they change their tone but deny it, where they rewrite what happened 5 minutes ago as though it didn't happen, where they say one thing with their words and another with their face. Your brain receives contradictory information, two signals that can't both be true. And the replay loop is your brain's attempt to reconcile them. It's not dysfunction. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do, trying to make sense of incoming data. The problem is that the data was deliberately scrambled. The loop isn't the problem. The loop is the evidence that something happened that your mind is not allowed to name. Why this is not anxiety. I want to be direct about something because this matters. If you go to most therapists and you describe this, the replaying, the second guessing, the mental fog after conversations, there is a very high chance they will call it anxiety, maybe rumination, maybe catastrophizing, maybe cognitive distortion. And those are real things. They exist. But if the confusion you're experiencing is happening after interactions with a specific person or inside a specific relational system, it is not a disorder of your brain. It is a response to what is being done to your perception. Anxiety happens when the threat is imagined or disproportionate. What we're talking about is different. What we're talking about is a response to a real event, a relational event, where your perception was systematically made unreliable, where the other person's version of reality was imposed over yours. And your brain is now trying to figure out which one is real. That's not a disorder. That's a sane response to an insane dynamic. The confusion is not the illness. The confusion is the symptom of being in a relationship where truth has become negotiable. What the system is actually doing. Let me show you the mechanics, because once you see this, the confusion starts to make sense. In covert relational environments, the person you're interacting with needs to maintain a certain version of reality, their version. And they do this not through direct confrontation. That would be too visible, but through small, consistent destabilizations. A tone shift with no explanation. A word that means one thing on the surface and something else underneath. A facial expression that contradicts what they just said. An emotional withdrawal that gets denied. A conversation that pivots so subtly you don't notice until you're suddenly defending yourself and you don't know how you got there. None of these are dramatic enough to point to. That's the design. Each one on its own looks like nothing, but your nervous system doesn't process them one at a time. It processes the pattern, and the pattern says, something is wrong here, and I am not allowed to say what. So the confusion you feel afterward is not a failure of your perception. It's the result of a system that is actively working against your ability to perceive clearly. You are not confused because you are broken. You are confused because clarity was made dangerous. How this connects to weeks 1 through 3. Let me show you the thread because it's getting tighter now. Week 1, your body is exhausted because it's under surveillance. Someone is watching, not meeting, and your nervous system stays managed. Week 2, guilt has been installed. Your body carries emotional responsibility for climates it did not create. Week 3, freeze takes over. Your body shuts down your authentic response. You go polite. You go managed. Week 4, today, you walk away from the interaction and your mind scrambles. The freeze kept you silent in the moment, and now the confusion keeps you silent after. Surveillance, guilt, freeze, confusion. Do you see what's happening? The system is closing. First, your body is managed by the environment. Then, your body takes on false responsibility. Then your body locks your voice. And now your mind is scrambled, so you can't even process what happened clearly enough to name it. This is not 4 separate symptoms. This is one architecture, and you're standing inside it. A word about recovery. I want to be careful here, like I was last week. I am not going to tell you to start calling people out. I'm not going to give you a script. What I'm going to give you is something much smaller and much more important. The next time you leave a conversation and the fog rolls in, the replaying, the second guessing, the pressure in your chest, the sense that reality shifted, I want you to do one thing. Pause. pause and say this to yourself: my mind is not broken. Something happened in that conversation that my body is trying to process. I don't have to figure it out right now. I just have to let myself know that the confusion is data, not a deficiency. That's it. You're not solving the conversation. You're not confronting anyone. You're interrupting the part of the loop that says, I'm the problem. Because when the installed guilt and the confusion work together, they form a closed loop. The confusion says, I don't know what happened. The guilt says, it must have been me. And the loop runs until you're exhausted. Week 1 exhaustion, and it starts all over again. Recognition breaks the loop, not by solving it, by stepping outside it long enough to see it. That's all I'm asking you to do this week. Just see it. The spiritual physics of confusion. I want to close where I always close, with Jesus, because what we're talking about today isn't just neuroscience, it's spiritual. Before I go here, I want to say something. If you grew up in a system that used scripture as a weapon, if the Bible was part of the architecture that controlled you, I see that, and I'm not going to do that here. In the scripture, I'm going to talk about Jesus is doing the opposite of destabilization. He is restoring someone's right to trust what they experienced, and that is what I am addressing in today's reading. In John chapter 9, there is a man who was born blind. Jesus heals him. And you would think that's the end of the story, but it's not, because the religious leaders, the system, cannot accept what happened. It doesn't fit their version of reality. So they interrogate him. They bring in his parents. They question him again. They tell him to change his story. They say, this man who healed you is a sinner. Give God the glory, meaning deny what happened to you and agree with their version. And this man, who has been blind his entire life and has just received sight, says something extraordinary. He says, whether he is a sinner, I don't know. One thing I know, I was blind and now I see. That is a man refusing to let a system overwrite his direct experience. They keep pressing. They try to confuse him. They try to make him doubt what his own body just received. And he holds his ground. Not because he has theological arguments, not because he understands the politics, but because his body knows what happened, and he will not let anyone take that from him. Here is what I want you to hear. The system that creates confusion after conversations is doing what those religious leaders did. It is asking you to deny your own experience, to override what your body perceived, to accept someone else's version of reality over your own. And Jesus, in that story, does not side with the system. He goes back and finds the man. He doesn't interrogate him. He doesn't ask him to prove anything. He simply reveals himself to him. He says, "You've already seen me." The God who heals does not then ask you to doubt the healing. He confirms what your body already knows. That's spiritual physics. When a system scrambles your perception, God does not add to the confusion. He restores your ability to trust what you experienced. He does not take the side of the version that silenced you. He stands with the testimony your body carries. So when the fog rolls in after a conversation and your mind starts to loop and the guilt says it must be you, know this. There is a God who has never once said, "Maybe you're just being too sensitive." He has never said, "You're overthinking this." He has never rewritten what happened to you so it's easier for the system to manage. He says, "I see what happened and I am not confused." That's where the nervous system and the spirit meet. That's the physics. That's where we'll leave it this week. Confusion after conversations. The scramble that comes when a system destabilizes your perception and your mind tries to solve what was designed not to be solvable. And a God who is never confused by the confusion. If something in this landed for you, sit with it gently. You've been carrying this for a long time. You don't have to figure it all out today. You just have to start seeing the loop. Next time, we're going to talk about what happens when the management of everyone else's emotions becomes your full-time job. Hyper responsibility. Week 5. We'll get there. You are seen. You are safe. You are deeply loved. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.